And just to make sure I have your name correct, Carl Cox.
Yeah, go
Is that
Carl J. Cox if you don't
Carl
mind,
J. Cox?
because Carl Cox is a famous DJ and it really
Oh,
hurts my SEO.
yeah, that stinks. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Revolutions of Returns podcast hosted by the Alternative Investing Club. Today, we're going to be talking with Carl J. Cox, who is in the local Portland suburbs area. And he is going to be talking to us today. Actually, why don't you introduce yourself? And I know what you do, but let's narrow it in on what you'd like to talk about. And we will spend about a half hour talking about it and how you help your clients in this area. So, Carl?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be on the podcast today. And once again, Carl J. Cox, CEO of 40 Strategy and also of 40 Accounting. What I get hired to do is help organizations achieve their goals in terms of investment value. And that's exactly, in terms of what you're trying to do is help out. And we work with two companies of two sides. One is we help them to get to sale. So our goal is to help increase their enterprise value before they get to sale. So that's number one. And then the second thing is I get brought in by private equity firms when it hasn't, and one of their portfolio companies has not received the value that it is. And so what I'll do is I'll help that organization turn it around to get to the outcomes that they desire.
Very nice. So you really work with businesses that are looking to sell as opposed to buyers of businesses. Do you concentrate most of your effort over there? And
Well, so yeah, it's typically they're looking to sell, but also the ones that are already acquired. And
Mhm.
and so then they're trying to get that multiple back out of the company because for whatever reason, when they came in, they bought it, they had a certain set of expectations. It didn't get to the results. And so it's a very interesting process gets through there. So that's generally who we're working with is if you may, people on the sell side trying to get out of their companies and from that perspective.
Now this is 2024, towards the end of 2024. What are the biggest reasons that you see that people are selling their businesses, and what's a kind of a persona and a demographic for, or is there one of people that are selling businesses in your area or farther if you work with people further?
Yeah, so what's interesting is there's one of the biggest challenge for business owners is that 90% of the retirement is typically trapped in their business. Okay. And so what happens, unfortunately, for most organizations is they wait too long. They wait past their point of a maximum value, if you may. And so they go past that point and then they're scrambling and they get to the point where they get taken advantage of, or they don't get the values they get. And that just really honestly disturbs me. It disturbs me that, granted, each person has their own decisions for making it. So that's one side. There's another side behind this, which is pretty exciting, which is how do you exit without exiting? Okay. So if you may, how do you create oil wells, right? Or how do you create like renewable energy from your business? That is a
Hmm.
best case scenario. But what that requires is you have to learn, you have to be able to let go and you have to be able to decrease your risk, bring in a management team or a general manager and have them run the company. But if you're able to have your freedom and be able to exit out of business, that's a wonderful situation, right? What's missed often is everybody, I should be careful of this statement. Typical enterprise value is adjusted EBITDA times the multiple, right? And that's generally what a company is sold for. So there's this game when business owners are selling, they don't recognize that the private equity firm has 100 times more experience plus in that experience, and they're typically taken advantage of. So the goal is to properly prepare before you even get to the investment banker. See, technically the
Hmm.
investment banker's goal is to maximize your value through getting competitive bids. And through those
Hmm.
competitive bids, it actually brings up the price of the sale of that entity that's trying to sell. What they don't typically focus on, and what we try to work on with companies pre going to investment banker, is decreasing EBITDA. Is that everyone gets that? You increase the EBITDA, the value is going to go up. But what you really want to do is decrease your risk, which is increases your multiple.
Okay.
Okay. Most people look at the multiple, they'll go on, the internet and they go, oh, I've got a manufacturing company and therefore the multiple is 5.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
that's just a point. That's just a data point. It's the median, right? It's not necessarily where, the reality is somewhere between probably 2.5 and 10 is where companies are being sold at for manufacturing companies. So the goal here is to be able to decrease the risk of a business before the investment banker, before you start talking to private equity, and before you start bidding up the price, because then you can maximize the outcome. A typical $1 million business EBITDA will have like about a 3 multiple. I'm being very standard when I'm making these comments. Okay. If that's 90% of somebody's retirement, after tax, they're going to get about $1.5 million, right?
Yeah.
So 3 million. Now, if you get rid of the discount and you get it to up to 7 million, a 7x multiple, which is the higher end of the range typically. Okay. That $4 million, if you can get a 7 million, you sell at half of that, even let's just assume half for taxes, get to 3.5 million. 3.5 million in retirement is a lot better than 1.5 million in retirement, right?
Sure.
So that is what we're trying to do when we're working with organizations is how do we get towards this? Now, Daniel, I'm going to say this from the buy side. Okay. We want to find these companies that haven't figured that out.
Hmm.
Okay. We want to find these diamonds in the rough of people who haven't figured out how to create process. They haven't put in their people. They don't have the right systems. And so they can take these diamonds in the rough and they put these processes in place to then get a greater outcome. That's what a great business broker is there for, is to help you find these businesses that you consider buying. You buy them at a higher risk, meaning there's too much risk into it. You decrease the risk and you increase the outcome. That combined with financing is how PE companies make money.
Okay. So I, of course, and I think anybody who's looked at a lot of businesses have often seen businesses when you'll ask for their, their income expense reports over the last couple of years, their tax returns or something like that. You'll see these businesses that are obviously polishing their diamond in the rough. They're polishing it. Their income is boosted up tremendously, maybe even just the last year. Maybe it was low for year 2 and 3, and then suddenly, boom, it's higher. They've got, you know, more contracts, but they're shorter term. They've got, better processes. And so I guess what I want to ask is there are probably processes that you can use in order to make your company look good right as you're selling, but aren't necessarily sustainable. Or maybe they're even detrimental. Maybe you're boosting your income, while taking on some type of strategic debt that's not sustainable. Not debt in terms of money, but a strategy which is not sustainable. What types of strategies do you suggest, and can you differentiate between a healthy long-term strategy and one that's just meant to polish it for the broker? And honestly, polishing it for the broker may or may not arguably be a bad thing. So can you comment a little bit about on some of those strategies?
Yeah, so let's put the other side of the coin, right? The seller side. Even if they're not super savvy, they typically recognize when they're in a bubble,
Hmm.
right? For example, there were a lot of companies that benefited from COVID. There was
Sure.
the companies who died from COVID, but there's the companies that benefited from COVID. So if they, for some reason, got stimulus money into their system, they probably had, effectively stimulus money that was driving it, which then ended up they had way higher end of things. And if they sold at that peak, good for them, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was
I
that was
saw
good for
several
them.
companies who counted the stimulus money towards their EBITDA numbers, and I was like, I don't think so.
But there also was a lot of money in the system, and so much money was in there that people were bidding up these
Yeah.
companies as well because they're trying to find something to buy to turn it around. Because once again, typically the equity play is more of a financing game than it is the multiple game.
Hmm.
What I
Hmm.
mean by that is like there's a typical process that happens on the financing side, and I think most of your people will know this, but there's debt that's typically put into it. You pay off the debt by the earnings of the company, and by definition, you've made a profit,
Yep.
right, off of that deal. And then the second way to make money off of it is, of course, to increase the EBITDA or decrease the multiple, which then gets to a better outcome. That's the game. The
Mm-hmm.
other part of the game, which is often that management team doesn't survive, that transfers over. Preferred equity ends up going over the common stock around it. And so they get less than they expected from the actual experience behind it. So it's a, as I said, it's a tricky game for an owner. Like some of the best decisions, honestly, there's this belief that you should roll your money into the next roll up. Like if you're selling your company, it often doesn't go well that second go around because what's going to happen under that next, there's a reason why they were successful at A level size, but at a B level organization, unless they are all into process and they can check their ego at the door, things don't typically go pretty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the game is actually, unfortunately, not, I can't say this for all private equity, but unfortunately, if they don't perform, they will not get that equity that they expected, right? And they'll lose it. The other part is the earnout side. We're going to buy you for $5 million, but $2.5 million is the earnouts. Well, ask anybody who sold earnouts beforehand. Rarely do you get 100% of that earnout.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. There are a lot of people that are in our local area who uh, there's a couple of large companies where we're located near Portland, Oregon. There's Nike, there's Intel, there's others, but layoffs have been a story that has recently hit our community here. Do you have any advice for people that are looking to get involved in buying their own business? They're a Nike employee or an Intel employee and they want to buy their own business. Do you have any advice that you can give to them?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And of course, each person is different based on what they have and what they do. Let's just from a general standpoint saying we have a high quality employee that came from a great organization.
Hmm.
So now, in most cases, not all cases, most cases, they're going to be buying a company that's not as big as Nike or Intel, right? And it also won't have the same cash reserves as Nike or
Hmm.
Intel does. So one of the biggest surprises that happens for people who go from big co to entrepreneurial startup or even private equity firm is those resources and often the quality of people aren't there,
Hmm.
meaning in terms of experience and training skills that they've had. I'm not saying that they're not extraordinary human beings, but they won't have the same skill sets that you're used to if you're in a fab in a certain area.
Hmm.
So there is a change that happens with going for that different size of company. And that's something that they have to recognize. And then the third thing is as they go into it is they have to recognize that what they did at their previous company will not all transfer across to the new company. So there may be a strategy that Nike was able to do or Intel was able to do, but often those strategies apply to because I mean, let's face it, right? Nike has a few competitors out there, but they have this massive brand that people get to benefit it. And Intel has one of the biggest foundries in fabricate. They have the most chips that are able to sell, and so they get to benefit from that.
Sure.
You starting out a new business, you don't have that brand recognition, you don't have that market capacity, and so you have to help create it. One of the things I think what they can do and bring into a new company is put in process.
Mm.
Most small but medium sized companies don't have process, and that's what a entrepreneur could bring. They have to though balance what I call over processing things. They have to process to the right amount to help make sure that that small to mid-sized company is going to work. Um, and if and the last thing is you have to learn and listen, come in with an open mind and recognize that things are going to be different. I think if people apply those different concepts, they have a much more greater likelihood of being successful.
If you're a small business person, maybe you've got an organization with, 5 to 20 employees, something like that. What are some of the low-hanging fruits? What are some of the processes that are often not implemented that you immediately turn and say, "Hey, do you have this? Do you have this? Do you have this?"
Great question. So first of all, nearly nothing will have process, right? So when you go to a company that has 5 to 20, so you have to, what are the things going to have process around? So number one is you start with process on whatever is quote unquote operations.
Hmm.
Okay. So if you're pick, packing, shipping something of a product, or you have software that you're servicing in customer service, whatever it is, you want to put process in there. The reason why you want to put process in there is when somebody leaves your company, not if, that you have the ability to bring somebody else in without them just being smart, right? You want them to be able to go and follow the process. And so what you want is to be able to check on the process, not check on the person, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
And so that's number one, put it in operations. And then two, the back office, accounting, financial reporting, budgeting. You probably don't have an HR person, right? So that by where a little sun, little aha moment, right? For anybody who's in a small business, you should not have an HR manager, right? At a small company. That's an expense. You don't need it. Your responsibility to manage people.
Hmm.
Not to shove it off to somebody else in a corner office, so to speak. And so that's another big part that we have to put around. But which means we have to have, and this is where I go into long-term strategic planning. So I'll go into Daniel. The third side, which is behind it, is start developing plans. Most small businesses don't have long-term plans, right?
Hmm.
They're typically managing their business by looking at their bank account, and their bank account is considered happiness or losing. Like that's winning or losing. So starting to change it so where they're looking at, okay, here's the income statement, here's our 3-year plan, and here's the things we have to do today to get to the outcome of 3 years from now to grow.
Hmm.
Those things typically aren't thought about. They're intuitive from a business owner, but they're not documented.
Hmm. You mentioned the key word that I was going to bring up here, documented. And my next question was going to be, how do you go about documenting it so that you can easily or accurately communicating it out to everybody? Do you like using whiteboards? Do you like putting it in Notion online? Do you like, shared documents? I'm a practical guy. I really do, and I'm an engineer, and so I kind of obsess about these things. How do I do this the best? What do you recommend for actually, I mean, do you recommend drawing mind maps, having weekly meetings? How do you communicate those processes?
That's an excellent question. And I will stay away from specific tools because there's so many different tools that can be used, but I'll say there's the process behind it that is critical. So first
Okay.
of all, everyone should know what your vision is, right? Yeah, where are we going 3 years from now? What does it look like? That's number one. Two, we need to get down what are our goals. And a lot of people in both Nike and Intel are aware of like, okay, what's our OKRs, but how are they tied towards the vision,
Hmm.
right? And then the next part around that is how are we tracking it on a consistent basis? Because unfortunately, most people only check on strategic initiatives like once a quarter, maybe once a year.
Sure.
The reality is we should be doing that weekly. And Daniel, this is where I go to is this is where I do love whiteboards. Now, if you're a virtual company, you can't do that. You have to do different type of area, different software to help track it. But I'm a big believer in weekly and appropriate on an operations level daily communication in a huddle type format to help make sure everybody's staying on the same page.
Okay. And so, as we're closing off here, can you describe a little bit about your company? And I know we started off with this, but give us a little, maybe a case study or sometime where you helped one of your clients, a story that you can relate.
Sure. So one client of mine, they came to me and they said, Carl, I really want to fix this KPI, this key performance indicator that we have, because we think he's like, this is what I think the problem is. And so I came up to visit with them, and I said, no, let's not focus on just one KPI. Let's look at the entire process. How do we make money?
Hmm.
And so we went through literally the entire process of how do we make money, and how do we go from order to shipping our product out to collecting cash.
Hmm.
And in that process, what we found was there was huge bottlenecks within the company. And then we uncovered that not only could we reduce those bottlenecks because there was just a lot of waste in the process, but we ultimately ended up we're able to, in this one particular case, we reduced the time to order from, we recognized it took 160 hours from order to delivery, and we could get it done in less than 40 hours. Matter of fact, 24 hours is what we figured out. So part of what I do is I help people understand what's really happening in their business.
Mm.
And then what we do is we create strategic goals to help solve those problems. And then we get better outcomes. For that particular company, sales increased 30%, bottom line doubled. They were very happy, 7-figure type increase in earnings output. That is the type of results that we do on a consistent basis. We do this once again the pre-purchase companies. We also do it in the turnaround companies. There's one company we're working with down in the Central Valley here. Um, they hadn't made money in 7 years, no growth. Through a change of people, process, and systems, we doubled the company, got to 18% EBITDA. Now it's ready for
Very
sale.
nice. Very nice.
So those are the type of things that we're doing with companies. It's a combination of strategic planning and execution to help make sure that we're tracking with it. So I'm not to say that people won't hire me for just strategic facilitations, but part of our strength is to help make sure that things get done.
Right. And one last question, and I'm going to point this more less towards the business operators and more towards investors and businesses. There are a lot of, Intel employees, Nike employees, other types of employees in this local area. But of course, this broadcast isn't limited to the local area. If people like that have busy jobs want to get involved in, investing in small businesses, what is your advice for doing that? I'm if that's not quite, in your wheelhouse, let me know too. But I think it's close enough that you would have an interesting perspective on it.
So one of the best ways to make money is having a side job,
Mm.
right? And if the beauty of, once again, somebody who has been trained and experienced and has capital is they can invest in small companies. And with people, process, and systems, they can help turn that, once again, I'll go into turn that break even company into an oil well. Matter of fact, I was just talking to a gentleman the other day where by using brokers, he has a full time job. And by using brokers, he's been able to take 3 different companies and significantly increase the wealth of those companies. And he still has his main job.
That's awesome.
So this is something that's very possible. A lot of people think you have to do franchises. You don't. That's, but honestly, franchises are only about 5% of business.
Hmm.
The reality is there's a lot of companies out there and only 50,000 companies sell per year and there's 33 million small businesses. So there is a starving need for these people to want to sell. Once again, whether they're trying to get out because they're trying to retire, or whether they don't have an heir in the business and there's nobody to hand it off to, or whether they're just tired and they just want to go back to like having a normal job. And so from those different practical experiences, there's so much opportunity for people who want to get into that, but it's not easy,
Hmm.
right? So I don't want to make it sound like these are, it is stressful, it is challenging. But if you want to make extraordinary returns, you have to put thought and process into doing some extraordinary action.
Hmm.
And if you could get it into a way where, once again, it you can help bring in a management team or bring in a general manager, run that business from the person that you bought it from, and you put the process system in place, it could be a very lucrative way to help increase your wealth.
Hey, just a really practical question about financing. So this person, you say, hypothetical client A, who has a full-time job and he enjoys having part-time jobs or, jobs on the side where he rehabilitates companies. Um, my understanding of how companies are usually purchased are often through an SBA loan or something like that that requires you to put your house up for collateral oftentimes. So, how does a person do that to 3 companies? Is he, doing them one at a time, putting his house up as collateral each time? Is he leveraging some other piece of collateral instead of his house? I think it would be a worry for people coming out of a regular job to put their home at risk. And so I'm wondering what strategies this person is using in order to achieve his results.
Well, here I'm going to start with that's the difference between an employee and an entrepreneur,
Mm,
right? You have to take risk.
sure.
And so, we can put our money into investment vehicles like what, into a combined group of people where you're taking less risk. But if you want to make the extraordinary risk, it's because you're putting in risk capital into it, i.e., you're putting your home up. I mean, it's no different, honestly, than people that are in a engineering firm or an accounting firm. They're almost always taking a loan off of their house to be able to buy units into it. That's an entrepreneur at that point, right? That they put their actual own risk capital into it. And that's the difference. But that's why, the tax laws are built for entrepreneurs
Hmm.
because they're taking risk. And that's why, when Warren Buffett says he's making a less tax rate than his secretary, I think famously said one time, well, it's because there's a reason behind that. Is because you do lose money in the process and you might not get your
Sure.
money back versus somebody who takes no risk, right? In the process and they're just being an employee.
Hmm.
And so I think that's that big decision that people have to make, and it's not for everyone.
Does buying a house necessarily mean you have to put your house up as collateral?
No, you don't
Does
necessarily
buying
have.
a business, I meant, mean you have to
No,
put your
no,
house
no,
up?
no, no. I mean, it depends. It honestly, it depends on whether often it's a personal guarantee, not
Hmm.
necessarily directly the
Sure.
house, but that might end up meaning that your house is therefore on the line, if that makes
Hmm.
sense, because you would have to
Yep.
produce the capital to get through to it. But, once again, don't take a loan out for something that you don't have a plan for the proceeds,
Sure.
right? And then what you want to do as soon as you get that company turned around is you pay that SBA loan out.
Yep.
So as soon as you get to the point where you get your EBITDA or your net income up to a higher enough level, then you turn to a traditional line of credit or traditional loan that is not secured by yourself. That's the game,
Yeah.
right? Of where you want to get out of it. But until you have that asset there, something collateral to put against it, that's not your own cash, so to speak. You're going to have to go through that path. But that is the tough risk if you don't have the capital on the side to put in.
How early do you get involved with the business owners? Are you getting involved with people that are that have had their business for a long time and are just looking to clean it up and make it look good so that it could sell? Or do you have clients that are earlier on in the business process, say somebody who just purchased a business and maybe they're used to being an employee and they don't really know. I mean, they probably have some ideas of the processes they want to put in place, but do you work with people like that are looking to professionalize that experience of putting process in place?
The answer is yes. Yeah, I work with both sides. So I work
Okay.
with once again the individual professional who's looking, and this is the thing I'll say because it's um I'll just my business right here, 40 Strategy. I've hired 5 coaches in the 5 years that I've been in this business.
Okay.
When you're off on your own, one of the biggest challenges I didn't mention beforehand is just an insight is it's scary because you're all alone, right? Yeah, you might have employees, you might have people in there, but it's a scary process. And if you can help get a coach to help along with the process to help make sure that you're going in the right direction, you're going to want to talk with them because you're going to learn this is one of those horrible experiences that your employees won't be telling you the truth all the time because their paycheck depends on it. And so they're going to tell you things that you want to hear, not necessarily what you need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And having a business coach to help give you guidance and help give you the confidence as you're moving along the way, I'm a big fan of. And so that's part of. I mean, we do what I call practical, strategic, and advice to help move things through, and then helping them to execute. But honestly, a lot of it is the confidence side behind things because the worst thing that people could do is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Every day you don't do an action, your rent doesn't stop being have to be paid in your building, right? Your employees have to be paid. Every day you don't make an important decision to change the direction of your company, you're technically potentially losing money, right? And so to have somebody alongside with you or creating a advisory board or a board of directors to help make you get the right decision is a really important component because you don't have that management team around you anymore from your bigger company that used to be able to bounce ideas along with.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap it up? Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, so one of the things I will say that we've been able to put in place, and this could apply to any company, whether you're looking to invest in a company or whether you, is we've put together $4 million strategies concept. And we literally can take all of these risks that we were talking about and actually put it into a monetary dollar return.
Hmm.
Okay, so that's one of the challenges. Like if you can change it from 3 million to $7 million, we actually can actually identify that now. Identify what you should specifically work on so you could prioritize that and help make a decision on a reinvestment standpoint. And that's what our $4 million strategy podcast. It's a 4 minute podcast that we have Monday through Friday. It's literally going through, we have experts talking about how to improve it, but what it's doing is literally identifying all of these risks and how to fix it. And so there might be people on your podcast that's interested in learning more about that. They could go to 40strategy.com to learn more. And I've also, if you're interested in being an entrepreneur and going out and investing on your own, I also have a book called Lost at CEO, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Strategy, where people could go and go and take a look at that. It's a fable. It's written in a way that's more of a story type concept around it. But I think you'll understand the concepts of how to be more strategically thoughtful in your small to mid-sized business that you think of acquiring.
Excellent. Carl, thank you so much for being on the Revolutions of Returns podcast by the Alternative Investing Club. And thank you for speaking to our audience and really talking about how businesses can be made so that they put process in place in order to increase their value. And there's such a huge need for this as well, because most small businesses don't have that. And so there's a huge opportunity with people retiring or people changing their lifestyles where you can go in and improve a business and really create a long-term asset for yourself that's that you can actually, work yourself out of. You can put enough process in there that it becomes the fabled passive income source or near passive. I don't know that there's anything that's truly passive. But thank you for coming in here and sharing with us. And we hope to hear from you again soon.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right.